reading about Serbia, I am amazed as to how much the Serbians suffered and also as to how much the Serbs resisted, how much they fought against fascism, how much they fought against the Germans and the ultra-nationalist Croatian Ustaša. And I am also horrified as to how much the Serbs suffered under the reign of terror of these monsters. Before the Germans invaded Yugoslavia, there was already this immense amount of hatred and antagonism against the Serbs. The Croats wanted their own state, and the Albanians were leading their own jihad, their own holy war against the Serbs. So when the Germans invaded Yugoslavia, they already had their proxies. They already had the people that were more than willing to work for the Germans to slaughter the Serbs. And so the Germans backed the Ustaša, the Germans backed Albanian fascist, the Germans backed Bosnian fascist. And with these monsters, with these butchers, because that's what these people were, they were butchers. I mean, they butchered so many people. The Croatians alone, they butchered from 500,000 to 700,000 Serbs. And the Albanians, they killed people as if they were killing cows in a slaughterhouse. And so with these people, with these monsters, the Germans dismantled Yugoslavia. The Germans dismantled Yugoslavia. After the Second World War, Yugoslavia came back. And then NATO came and destroyed Yugoslavia. So NATO finished what Hitler started. NATO completed what the Germans wanted to do, which was to destroy Yugoslavia. So there is this really amazing reality that we don't really talk about. Very few people talk about this reality. And that is that the Nazis wanted to destroy Yugoslavia. They dismantled it. They butchered the Serbs. They killed probably 1 million or so Serbs with their butcher proxies, the Croatian Ustaša, the Albanian fascists, the Bosnian Nazis. And then after the Second World War, Yugoslavia returns. You have Yugoslavia. And the Americans come along and they say, well, we're going to dismantle Yugoslavia. The Germans came along. They backed the Albanian neo-Nazis known as the KLA, the Kosovo Liberation Army. These people were racist, murderers. They were butchers. They kidnapped people. Even Albanians they kidnapped. They didn't care. They took Albanians who didn't agree with them. They took Serbs. They would kill them, take them for their organs, sell the organs in the organs trafficking underworld. These people were absolute monsters. They butchered civilians. They were horrendous, and they were really the reason. It was the KLA really was the reason as to why Yugoslavia had to go to war with the Kosovars. They were the reason why. It's not like Yugoslavia just wanted to go to war with the Albanians. No, it was because the KLA were terrorists, and they unleashed this reign of terror on Serbs. They drove Serbs out from their homes. They stole people's houses. They would ransack churches. I mean, these people were monsters. These weren't good people. They were backed by the Germans. The Germans essentially created the KLA. They trained these people. They gave them weapons. They backed them. And just as the Germans backed the Albanians in World War I, just as they backed the Albanians in World War II, they would back the Albanians again in the 1990s. Why? A leopard doesn't change its spots. Zebras can't remove their stripes. History repeats. There is nothing new under the sun. Just as in the 1990s, NATO backed the Croats. Germany was one of the first countries to recognize the independent Croatian state in the 1990s. Also, Vatican City. John Paul II was one of the first officials in the world, amongst the first officials in the world, to recognize the independent Croatian state in the 1990s. That tells you something. Just as you had people in the Vatican who supported the Ustasha, they supported the formation of the independent Croatian state. Just as you had major members of the Catholic clergy in Croatia literally supporting butchers, you had the Vatican supporting the independence of Croatia. It's a continuation of policy. It's very political because there are a lot of Catholics who are Croatian. I mean, the dominating religion in Croatia is Catholicism. So it makes sense, politically speaking, as to why the Vatican would support an independent Croatia. And you also had Operation Storm, which was backed by the West. Operation Storm was the major battle between the Croats and the Serbs, who were living in, what was it called? Srpska Krajina, I think. They were living in the Krajina region of Croatia. And the Serbs had their own little state on the edge of Croatia, and the Croats wanted to destroy it, so they had Operation Storm. And this was the biggest military deployment in Europe after the Second World War at this time. Now it's different because we have the war in Ukraine, so no longer is Operation Storm the greatest battle in Europe after the Second World War. Now we have Ukraine. But before Ukraine, it was Operation Storm. Initially, the Serbs were winning. They did a very good job. They didn't get any help from Belgrade, but they did put up a very good fight initially, but they were defeated by the Croats because the Croats got training and weapons, and they were getting backing from NATO, obviously. But it's amazing. I find it so amazing that Germany wanted to dismantle Yugoslavia. So it dismantled Yugoslavia with the help of the Croat Nazis and the Albanian fascists. And then after the Second World War, Yugoslavia comes back, and the Serbs were helping the Americans. I mean, there was so much praise for the Serbs, for their valor against the fascists. Eisenhower praised the Serbs. The U.S. government praised the Serbs. The word Serbia was repeated throughout the American media during the Second World War because they were so efficient, they were so valorous in battle against the Germans. In fact, it was the Serbs who delayed the Germans' invasion of Russia by 6 weeks. And for this reason, the New York Times declared that there should be a statue. This was back in 1946. The New York Times exhorted the Soviet Union to erect a statue of Dragoljub Mihailovic for leading the Serbs in battle against the Germans, delaying the Germans' invasion of the Soviet Union by about 6 weeks. And from being praised, they were hated. Isn't it sickening that Madeleine Albright, when she was a little girl, she was given refuge by a Serbian family? A Serbian family hid Madeleine Albright from the Nazis. And what did this old hag do? She supported the bombing of the Serbs, even though it was a Serbian family that saved her from the Nazis. And she did some conference in Serbia. She did it was a book signing event in Serbia, and some Serbs were protesting her, and she said something like, "Oh, you barbaric Serbs," or something like that. It was a Serbian family that saved her. And here's another amazing, disturbingly surreal fact. Okay? Very surreal fact. The Croats, the fascist, Ustasha, ultra-nationalist, trad Catholic Croats, who today would probably be praised by American trad Catholics as being based Catholics. These guys butchered They butchered between around 500,000 to 700,000 Serbs. Look what it says here. I'm reading this book. It's about Kosovo. It says Kosovo Crisis by Vojin Joksomovic. Look what it says here. More Serbs were slaughtered by the Croatian Nazis than by Turks over 5 centuries. The Turks controlled Serbia for 500 freaking years. 500 years. The Turks didn't do in 500 years what the Croatians did in a number of years. In a handful of years, okay? In a handful of years, the Croats butchered more Serbs than what the Ottomans did in 5 centuries. I'm telling you, this is what I'm trying to tell people. The Nazis are worse than the Muslims. They are worse than the Muslims. Racist, these far-right lunatics that Catholics will praise and call them base, they are worse than the Muslims. They are more murderous than the Muslims. Think about it. 500 to 700,000 Serbs butchered by the Croats. The Croatians killed more Serbs in a handful of years than the Ottomans did in 500 years. It's the same thing with Iraq. Christian and Muslim lived together in Iraq for centuries. Yes, there were persecutions. Yes, there were pogroms against Christians. But in the 20-year occupation of Iraq, led by the United States, there was more damage done to Christianity in Iraq in those freaking 20 years than in all of the centuries of Islam ruling over the Christians in Iraq. In 20 years, the Americans did more damage than what the Muslims did in all the centuries ruling over Iraq. That's how destructive the West can be. I mean, it's so destructive. So destructive. Islam dominated Iraq for so long. Yes, there was persecution. But NATO occupied Iraq for 20 years. And how many Christians are left in Iraq? A couple thousand, maybe? Not that much. There were over 1 million Christians in Iraq when Saddam Hussein was there. Saddam Hussein was so bad. He was so bad that when they removed him, all the Christians ran away. Why? I thought Saddam was bad. He was terrible. Why did all the Christians run away? Because he wasn't that bad, guys. Worse than Saddam Hussein were the people who wanted to kill Saddam Hussein. They were worse. Was Yugoslavia this beacon of liberty and freedom? I'm sure it wasn't, okay? I'm sure it had its own form of what Americans would call totalitarianism and all these things. It was nothing in comparison to the reign of terror led by the Ustasha. Give me a break. This is the problem with people. Everybody wants to holler and complain and, oh God, this one police officer did this. And then they want to do a revolution. They want to remove the police, dismantle this, destroy that, take down fences that were built for a freaking reason. Only to unleash a reign of terror worse than whatever it is they were complaining about. This is how it always is with people. Remove this, take this out, kill this leader, assassinate this guy, do this, do that. And they make things worse. Oh, God. This is how things began. The war against Serbia and Yugoslavia, it began with what? Having Albanian terrorists attack Yugoslav police officers because the police were so bad. They were so bad. And then, guess what? You're in a car and your organs are getting removed by some KLA lunatics. Give me Yugoslav police officers any day over these KLA lunatics. Give me Yugoslav police officers over Ustasha mass murderers any day. Give me Saddam Hussein over any of these crazy rebels that NATO backed any day. Anyway, you guys just heard some theology. God bless.